Imagine a way to save tropical rainforests without reducing greenhouse gases. Imagine a way to make environmental conservation profitable. Some say carbon trading is the best option for big corporations to pay for emitting pollution. I'm Fauzia Ibrahim. On this edition of 101 East, we ask if carbon trading can slow down global warming. Carbon trading allows companies that emit greenhouse gases to compensate for their pollution. They can do this by buying a forest or funding a conservation program in a developing country. While it sounds simple enough, critics say this billion-dollar business only benefits banks and investors. Step Varson reports.
This is a big forest that is about 200,000 hectares, and as you can see, there are a lot of destructions around the area. If we get our ecosystem restoration concession, then we will be able to restore the degraded part and keep the intact part just like it is, just like it should be. Peatland is basically wetland. As you can see, this is wet, and underneath is an accumulation of trees that have fallen over the years. And then because it's wet, the carbon stock, the carbon mass is preserved under the peatland.
Masuk tengah situ, ya.
Udah berapa meter?
Ya, terus.
Udah berapa meter?
32.
Terus dok, terus.
Dah, pegang di situ, pegang kencang.
Baru 32 sampai 50.
Going into the jungle with a measuring tape and a small drill, Rezal Kusumat Maja and his team are counting something untouchable: carbon stored in trees and in the peat underground. They aim to sell these carbon stocks at an international market in exchange for preserving the forest, a plan Indonesia, among other countries, has brought into the debate on global warming.
20% of greenhouse gas emission comes from the forest sector. The number changed recently, but what the latest number also shows that people realize that a big chunk of that actually comes from the peat emission. So this is a global effort to reduce emission worldwide, and what we are trying to do is to create incentive to do that by a system that you call cap and trade.
The so-called RED plan, reducing emission from deforestation and degradation, is still being discussed after it failed to be accepted at the climate change conference in Copenhagen. But experts are optimistic that this utopic idea will soon become reality. It may sound like a crazy idea, being paid for not cutting down these trees. But while other parts of this forest are being burned down or cut down, causing one of the largest greenhouse emissions in the world, a young breed of businessmen now say you have to think out of the box. Rezal and his business partner are about to invest $4.5 million to obtain the rights to preserve this forest, 3 times the size of Singapore. By selling their carbon credits, they hope to get enough money to restore and maintain the ecosystem, pay the local community and make profit as well.
We would like to invest that much money because we know that we can recoup the investment. A lot of people expect that people investing in this business will make loads of money. We don't think it's going to be that way, but at least we're going to recoup the investment and have a healthy return of investment.
Asdi is growing rubber trees, a new source of income since he stopped illegal logging. Like many others living in the forest, he made good money for many years. He stopped cutting down trees after the authorities became more strict.
Nah, karena kita ini sering menghayalnya uang itu mudah cariannya.
Because we earn so much money, I never counted how much I got in one day. I don't want to sound arrogant, but we easily spend $100 a day.
Hari ini belanjanya 1 juta, besok cari lagi.
Just spend it on anything.
Diri-diri aja, nggak usah apa ya?
Nobody asks any
Nggak
questions
usah
during this
kita,
so-called logging season.
Apa itu ya?
As a community leader, Asdi needs to convince others to stop logging and start planting instead. If carbon trade hits off, he hopes to receive a fair share.
Sudah berhasil. Iya. Kalau ada
Most importantly, the people will have to be involved. If not, they'll still continue to do illegal logging despite the difficulties they face. They will keep doing it secretly. That's natural. People will make this choice to survive.
Nah, gitu aja.
In the nearby village, the effects of a crisis are visible. While illegal logging still continues, the golden days are over, and many former loggers are out of work. 20% of the population has left the area, most to work in palm oil plantations. The village chief is worried about the future of his people.
Kondisi masyarakat kita sangat-sangat sulit sekali. Nah, inilah tangan dari pemerintah.
Our people are going through difficult times. The government should help us if they are serious about combating global warming. They want to plant millions of trees. Of course, that's all very important. But please also think about the people who live from the forest.
Perdagangan karbon ini akan
Carbon trade can become a new source of corruption and conflict between different institutions and a source of conflict between people.
While other environmental groups are supportive of carbon trade, Greenpeace rejects it.
Greenpeace menganggap bahwa
According to Greenpeace, carbon trade is not a solution to global warming because developed countries can use this to evade the responsibility of reducing emissions in their own country.
maju kemudian
But Rezal and his team are pushing ahead, not only committing themselves to protect the forest, but also its wildlife. In their project area, an estimated 2,000 orangutans still live, although their numbers are declining quickly. Another reason to move fast, according to Rezal.
You have two choices. You want to avoid the risk or you want to take the risk. And I think we are ready to take the risk. If we receive funds from abroad in terms of carbon credit or aid, we have to be monitored so that it's transparent and it's accountable.
This week, 101 East comes to you from Malaysia, where we're discussing the issue of carbon trading and whether it is effective in slowing down global warming. Joining us now is Walden Bello, environmental activist in the Philippines Parliament, and also Dorji Sun from Carbon Conservation, a project developing firm. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Now, carbon trading, it's a very complex issue, it's a very complex scheme, and it's been in existence since 1997, the Kyoto Protocol. But have we seen any results?
Well, first, I think that one of the most important results is education. So without question, as a result of this carbon trading mechanism, many people who previously were unaware of the issues of climate change are now very aware of those issues. The second outcome is almost 5,000 projects have now been registered with the UN. And what that means is that there are 5,000 different avoidance programs, whether it's regrowing trees, whether it's energy efficiency in buildings, or whether it's industrial processes which waste less energy. But there's nearly 5,000 projects out there. By 2012, there is an estimated 1 billion tons which will be avoided, essentially. And so far, there's about 372 million tons as of February, which has also been avoided. So in my opinion, obviously from a somewhat biased stance, I think that carbon trading actually is good for the environment.
What about you, Walden Bello? Are you just as positive about carbon trading?
No, carbon trading has been a big failure. And the biggest market in carbon trading, the European emissions trading system, even the European technocrats admit that it's been a big failure. The price.
In what way, though?
Well, it was supposed to move firms and enterprises away from fossil fuel intensiveness into more renewable energy sources. It hasn't done that. Emissions have increased, and the price of carbon is at very low at this point in time, which means that there's really no incentive to buy carbon credits on the part of these enterprises. So it's been a big failure. There's been no successful case of this, and it's only really encourage the big polluters as much as possible to keep on polluting.
That's a constant accusation against carbon trading, isn't it, Dorji-san? I mean, you must hear that in your line of business.
All the time, and factually, if you were to look at the alternatives, the reason why I'm a big believer is some change is better than no change. I think that if you looked at the alternatives like a carbon tax or some other way, how do you turn, and I use the metaphor, the Titanic, like how do you turn our global economy on a dime to make it suddenly carbon neutral? It literally is not possible. And as a pragmatist, I think that if you look at the alternatives, there's no political will in the world to create a carbon tax, and there's no other way really to incentivize engagement with stakeholders to start changing our economy.
Walden Bello, is there any other alternative?
Carbon taxes are the way to go. You just, you have to really issue very stiff taxes. We're in a state of emergency, and we can't fiddle around with unproven schemes like carbon trading. Let's go for heavy taxes.
But Mr. MP, do you think that you could get a carbon tax up in your parliament?
I think given the emergency in which the world exists at this point, I mean a coordinated effort to in fact push taxes at the national level, at the global level is the way to go.
Let's pause the discussion just there for now. We're going to have to take a very short break, but when we come back, we'll have more on carbon trading and global warming on 101 East. Stay with us. And welcome back to 101 East. This week we come to you from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where we are discussing the issue of carbon trading and global warming. We start now with Dorji-san. Earlier on we were talking about the complex system of carbon trading. It does seem very complex, especially to the average person on the ground. And one of the accusations against this business is that it does make a lot of money for the middlemen like yourself. What do you say to that?
I wish it made a lot of money for people like myself. But actually, there's a lot of hard work in terms of quantifying what is essentially air. So what happens is, for example, right now we're sitting in this beautiful lush forest. What I'm particularly passionate about is how do we protect these forests because of their effect on climate change. For example, this forest absorbs and protects CO2. So my job is to quantify the amount and then have that verified by an auditor. We then have it approved by the country government. So for example, here it would be Malaysia. And then we take it to the UN. So that's the simple process. And by registering the project, you essentially create credits which you trade.
It does seem that carbon trading is a lot of smoke and mirrors.
You do need to understand that as we move forward, the era of plenitude, where there was plenty of natural resources, has to be somehow controlled. So what a cap and trade system does is it actually sets a global cap, which allows for companies to operate within. Now, I do understand some of the issues of urgency. I mean, for the last 3 years, this has been a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week job. But I think that in terms of the smoke and mirrors concept, there's no other way to really do it that would be more simple and transparent.
Well, let me just read to you a report from Friends of the Earth. Now, they say the majority of the trade is carried out not between polluting industries and factories covered by carbon trading schemes, but by banks and investors who profit from speculation on the carbon markets.
Well, I mean, I know there is a lot of trading of units, but fundamentally what underlies everything is that to this date, up until the 1st of February, there have been 472 million tons of CO2 reduced from being released.
Walden Bello, have you seen any results in terms of trying to fund these greener industries in the developing countries?
No, the real measure of how effective it is if it has in fact reduced in actuality concretely carbon emissions, and it has not done that in any way in real terms.
But on this point, I mean, so there is a baseline trajectory. So every country is developing and every country consumes more every year. I mean, the way that our economy is built is on economic growth. Everyone talks about the China miracle because it's growing economically 8% a year. But that also means that it's burning more fuel. So what essentially you have to look at is if the trajectory is continuing to grow, then a reduction will still be a reduction in terms of real growth terms, but naturally what many people would like to see is a reduction from the point today.
Or an
but you have
absolute
to factor
stop
it in.
to it. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but as much as I'd love for us to suddenly switch off all electricity, which is driven by coal, I don't think that's possible.
Well, but that's not really what we're after. We really want to slow down the rate of greenhouse gas emissions. And what is the most effective way, in fact, to do that?
But this, you have to give credit where credit is due, though. You know, when you try to engage major corporations, big corporations who are emitting pollution, who really don't really see environmental conservation as a priority, this is one way to engage them. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, this is in fact, you know, the problem when in fact these corporations, in fact, are allowed free credits, okay, and then they pass on you know, this supposed costs of putting pollution controls onto consumers, and they use this whole system to try to delay as much as possible the movement to less carbon-intensive technologies. This is not progress. This is giving the polluter, you know, a chance to keep on polluting. So the thing is that we now exist an emergency situation. Okay, there's carbon markets that are not proven, and there are taxes, you know, that have been effective in pushing companies in different ways. I mean, different kinds of taxes. So let's go with taxation in this core. And it's a question of governments really using civil society and other constituencies to be able to tell business and government, hey, we've got to move, and we can't take false solutions like carbon trading.
Two quick points. The first one is, if you truly, as a democratically elected MP, believe that we've got the political will today to get a tax through on carbon, then I would like to join you in your optimism. However, I sincerely doubt that. The second point is, I'll give you an example.
No, but it's an uphill battle, Daji. I mean, we need to be able to coordinate, you and me, with politicians all over the world. This is the time that civil society has got to come together and to say, there are no more false solutions, let's go with the hard solutions.
Civil society, though, is swayed by politics, by politicians, but carbon trading does affect the people on the ground. It does drive up prices. Dorji, what do you say to that? It does affect the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as much as I like the idea of there really being able to be just a flat carbon tax, I genuinely think that the best way to engage profit-driven businesses is first to offer them the ability to make money. But as political will ratchets up, and I actually think that there is going to be a climate 9/11. And by that, what I mean is that Miami is going to get hit by a bad hurricane, or there's going to be terrible droughts, or there's going to be huge fires in California. But until there's that 9/11 moment when suddenly there is the requisite political will, what will happen is you'll be basically trying to get this tax through, and it will never happen.
I think that it's important not to give people the idea that there are these solutions that don't really work, and you know that we tell them to rely on markets when markets have brought down the international economy, and where what you really need at this point is to tell people you've got to get government moving effectively on taxes, and you've got to mobilize civil society to do this. And taxes, by the way, I think, yes, it will increase pressures all along the line, but you also have tax revenues, and tax revenues are going to be able to be rechanneled and recycled back to consumers, especially to poor people, you know, in order to be able to deal with this. So you have, you know, when you think about tax revenues coming in, instead of nothing coming in because they all go to corporate profits, you've got a fund that you can recycle both to the poor people in your population as well as to developing countries that really need help in terms of meeting the challenge of climate change.
Dorji-san, your Aceh project, you've been able to get Merrill Lynch to be able to invest in
now
forests,
Bank of America.
to invest in the Aceh forests. However, there are reports that say illegal logging is still occurring in Aceh despite the moratorium. There is a problem with monitoring here, isn't it, when it comes to carbon trading projects?
Well, so we've always expected that there would still be deforestation, actually. So again, we come back to this baseline versus, you know, the hold it in time. So for example, we always expected that without our carbon money, the deforestation rate in Aceh would become like Sumatra. So right now Sumatra is 30% forest cover. Everything's been chopped down. But in Aceh, there's still 60% because of the rebels and the uncertainty and the tsunami, etc. So we always had hoped to hold the forest levels to about 50%. But we still expected to lose some just because livelihoods take a while to shift. But we're now starting to look at coffee, cocoa, rubber, you know, the education, healthcare, the things that will actually alleviate the deforestation problem. Right. But you've got to realize that there always will be some leakage as you shift.
Well, that seems to be quite good, but the run-of-the-mill projects are really profit-oriented. A lot of developing country entrepreneurs and firms are looking at the whole carbon credit market as a way to make money. They don't have any environmental consciousness. You know, we are now creating this new big market of carbon credits, a vast bureaucracy, monitoring is very weak, you have all these middlemen, and it's going to run on profits rather than salvation of the environment. And this is what we really worry about.
Well, Georgie, really, I have to wrap this up. And Georgie, let me just quote something that you once said. You said, "I love NGOs, but I don't think they're the people alone who can change the world. You have to make it a business." How do you make carbon trading a successful business?
Look, I agree with all of the points raised today, and the state of play today leaves us with, I think, only one alternative if you really want to get some movement on this issue. A tax and having a global government which will actually do this right, I think, is a bit of a utopia. So I think that the way you engage businesses is allowing them the carrot and the stick. The carrot is that they can make money by doing something good, but the stick is eventually there will be deeper cuts, which means that there will be higher costs. And so eventually they know that down the horizon, they're going to have to eventually offset their emissions, therefore they'll reduce them. Other than that, I just think that any type of grand coalition, you know, it's just very unlikely.
Walter Bello, do you think carbon trading can be successful in any way?
No, because the record has been one of failures and abuse and corruption. Just read the UN reports on this. And extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures and for extraordinary coalitions. And that's what we need to be focusing at this point. And I hope that in the next few months or years, we can bring along Dodgy to our point of view, because we think that as of now, he is headed towards an illusion, whereas the harder realities is that we really need very effective tax controls on polluting businesses.
Another way we could see it is perhaps there could be a compromise somewhere down the line. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. That's all the time we have for this edition of 101 East from the team here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Thanks for joining us.